to the Misfit Squad Podcast,
where we invite you to embrace your difference and to discover a spectrum of possibilities and change what's wrong about you into what is strong about you.
We're your hosts. I'm Lucien.
And I'm Trina Rice. We're the Misfits. What's your superpower?
Hey, everybody. Welcome to today's show. Watch your back and your sides and your front. The role of spherical awareness. So what the heck is spherical awareness, and do you have it? Spherical awareness is basically, to really simplify it, being aware of everything in all directions all the time, including being aware of the past, present, and the future, all in the same moment. But we're pretty much taught in this reality to be really linear about how we think and how we perceive, right? So we try to make A plus B equals C, or we think 1 + 2 = 3 every single time in every single situation, because we're taught to, step through things in order. Don't do things out of order. When you get out of order, things get messed up.
Yes.
Right? So, but what if it's not? What if that's actually not true for you? We all know people who actually can only function that way, right? Like if you literally are like, could you go do step number 4 and I'll just do 1 and 2? And they're like, you can see them start to twitch and their head like explode. So not everybody can do it.
Or it's walking into like if you've ever had it when you walk into a place and you're like, well, if we change this and we change this, it would work so much easier. Why don't we do that? And then people can't change it because that's not the way it's been linearized. It's not the way it's been done. And they can't get off that track.
And like, I just realized very recently that I'm constantly irritated when I'm out in public by people who, like, in my words, aren't frigging paying attention, and they like bump into you and they're like, la, 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 la. What I finally just realized is like those people don't have spherical awareness. They're only aware of like what is like 6 inches in front of them and nothing else.
Or most of the time, or they've shut off their awareness.
Or they've shut off their awareness, right.
Shut off of what they are aware of.
Yeah.
So with spherical, you're aware of like what's going on in front of you, what's going on behind you, what's going on the sides of you, below you. Like you're perceiving all of those sensations and all of those feelings.
So also sometimes that's a lot. It's a lot of information. It's a lot of input, right?
Yeah.
So
yes, and also you said it lightly at the beginning, but it also is being aware of, okay, this occurred in the past. You're aware of the past, present, and the future, and you can be aware of it all at the same time. And really, we don't think that is even possible until there's those moments in time when you're like, you realize, oh, I made that choice, and I was aware that choice could create this. So you really are aware of things, not everybody. However, you can be aware of the past, present, and the future all at the same time. And with all of that going on, yes, sometimes it can feel like it is what you would say overwhelming or too much, or you feel like you get a little prickly because it's a lot of information coming in all at the same time.
right. And so for kids, to bring this on kids who are experiencing that, they'll often act out, right? Or they'll like completely shut down.
Yeah.
Right. So
it can be when you have so much coming on and you don't have the self-regulation or you don't have the tools to be able to do that. That's when you can, fight or flight. So like, how many times are you at, like, even me, if I go to a mall sometimes and I'm shopping just to go get something and there's way too much going on, I'm like, I'm done. I'm out. Can't do it. I'm out. And I have to leave. It's just because there's so much sensory input and so much going on. So since spherical awareness is an amazing capacity and an amazing thing, and living in our world, it sometimes can be a little overwhelming when you get all that information.
Right. And so if we don't acknowledge it, if we don't acknowledge that we have it, more often than not, we end up on the sort of like poopy end of the stick.
Where we use it against ourselves.
Or we use it against ourselves, or we're like, oh my God, I got, just like you said, like, I got to go. And so you can't enjoy going into a crowded place. So for me, because I know that I have that, I have to sort of like, I guess I have some sort of processes. It's like, I feel like I get myself mentally prepared. Like, you know, a couple of months ago, I went to the rodeo. Like, it's fun, but also that environment's really hard for me. Right? Because it's a lot of like noise and stuff and smells and people. So I have to like, you know, knowing that I'm aware of it, I can sort of use the tools that I have and get myself organized in a way that I can go and be in that energy and not have it feel horrible.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and it's the same. This is a silly example, but it's the same thing as like kids going to like Chuck E. Cheese or somewhere where there's like all these different ball pits and tunnels and all these things, and all these kids are yelling and screaming, and it's so much fun and it's amazing. And at the same time, it can be a little overloading. So that's why when you realize, oh my gosh, I'm just so aware of what everybody else is sensing, what they're feeling. I might even be aware of what's going on in their heads. But when you don't realize that that's what's happening, you take all of that on.
Yeah. So you have a good example about, you know.
Yeah. So like one of the times, like what a lot of times I've explained it as when you are feeling like you're a little overwhelmed or overloaded, I imagine like a stew pot, like you're in a stew pot and you have in there, you have carrots and potatoes, maybe some celery, and you're this apple in there bobbing around. And you get covered by the broth because that's everybody's thoughts, their feelings, their emotions. You get all covered and you're like, I'm slimed. So, and then what happens is you lose yourself and everybody else's stuff because you're like, wait a minute, what was I actually thinking? What was I actually aware of? What was I feeling? So in those moments when you're feeling like you got a little too much going on, literally pull yourself out of the stew pot. Pull yourself out of everybody else's space, out of their realities. And what I perceive or see is like sit on the brim of the stew pot. So you're the apple, you pull yourself out. Now you're sitting on the brim of the stew pot and you can look in and you can go, oh, I see all that stewy mess down there. That's nice. But you can also then look around 360 degrees all around you and you see all these other possibilities that you couldn't see before when you were stuck in the stew pot with the broth covering you.
Yeah. Right. So that's basically flipping and using your spherical awareness for you instead of using it against you.
Because a lot of people will stay stuck in this stew pot and then they get all flustered with like the sorrow and the sadness and the grief and the anger versus being like, okay, I'm aware of that. And what else am I aware of? What else is going on here? Pull yourself out. You look around, you're like, oh, if I just chose this or I made a different choice, it could totally change the entire situation. That's being spherically aware of everything.
Yeah. So another way so what are some of the other ways that you use spherical awareness? Like if we're in terms of like processing information. So we've talked before about like extrapolating and extrapolation. So first of all, what's extrapolating, or what does it mean to extrapolate?
Well, to me, extrapolation is, I don't know the official definition, but it's where you have so much information and you kind of like you get to pick and choose. You're like, oh, okay, if I take that piece and this piece of information and this piece of information, and then you put it all together, and that allows you to get the information that you're looking for.
Right. So it's basically stepping away from A, B, C, D, E, F, G and picking, oh, I need A and I need F and I need, C, and then I need D.
Yes.
And then I need B. And you string it together that way, and then that creates the whatever.
Yeah.
So one of the things that people who are spherically aware, who acknowledge their capacities with spherical awareness, they're excellent at extrapolating. So think about how you look at information and how you use information. And is that something that you do?
Yep. Like an example would be, for instance, if you're writing an article or like a book or whatever, it's like you have all this information and you might have written like the order that you think it's supposed to go in, like, and you wrote all this out, and then you're like, oh, wait, it doesn't fit right. So you really have to extrapolate the different pieces. So then you blend it together so that it actually does flow. I don't know if that helped as an example or not.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's basically, again, because we're really taught to do things in order, that everything must function in a linear fashion.
Yeah. Or how many of you have ever picked up a book and instead of picking it from the cover and reading through it, you start in the back cover, or you flip it open in the middle and you read it that way. You might read a chapter and then you go back and read a different chapter. That's also part of extrapolation, because you're not doing it in a linear fashion. You're doing it in your awareness of like, oh, maybe there's information here I need. And you may not have been even consciously aware that that's what you're choosing.
One of the things that I think is actually funny that's occurring to me just now as we're speaking is that this reality is set up that everything is supposed to be linear, but lots of things don't function that way. For those of you that don't know, I spent 20 years helping businesses write processes about how they're supposed to do things. And when you're writing a process document about how something is supposed to go, it's very, very linear. And they try and make it very linear, and that's what flow charts and the whole thing, like that's all like very like linear. But what I found in actually sitting down with the people doing the work and taking the steps, it's not really linear. They're like, well, I do this, and then on this screen, I'm going to need this later, so I can do this thing, so I'm going to do that now instead of waiting until step 20. Right? So a lot of people don't function that and don't extrapolate, but a lot of people do. And so that's just a good example, is like, look at the order of the steps. And then if you're doing things like, oh no, that doesn't make sense, that's a form of extrapolation. It's a form of spherical awareness. You're aware of and that's a good example of being aware of the future at the same time as you're aware of the present, because you're like, oh, right? Because that the train agrees, people. Clearly my office is on a train line.
It's like, yes, that. So what if you could actually use spherical awareness for you and not against you? Like, what if you didn't have to get so overwhelmed or overloaded with all of the information and all the input you're getting, and realize that, hey, that's information, that's awareness, and how can I extrapolate that and use that to my advantage?
Right. So before we go, I'm thinking about all the people who are still in their head thinking like, well, how do I get my apple on the edge of the pot? I'm like stuck and I don't have any arms and legs. I'm an apple. I'm bobbing up and down and I can't stop.
Oh my gosh.
It's a really funny image in my head.
That's spherical awareness too, because you then get all those images of what that would actually be like and look like and feel like and maybe even taste like.
I'm highly amused by that right now. So what's the first thing we tell people to help them? Like, it's basically a tool, even though it's not a tool day. But how do you get your apple out of the pot?
Jump. Just kidding.
I'm glad we think we're funny.
You know, asking a question like, is this mine? Is this really mine? If everything I'm this like overwhelm or overload, everything I'm aware of, or that thought that's in your head, ask, is it mine or does it belong to somebody else?
Yeah. And so for me, like, I'm thinking about like, when I start to like feel that, then I'm like, okay, I'm feeling that. That's my first thing, is like, I acknowledge that I'm like feeling that. And then I'm like, I physically take like a breath. And then I will like, is this mine? What am I aware of? And how much more big can I make my energy?
Yeah.
The more space you can occupy, the less those carrots and potatoes are going to punch you in the face.
Yeah. So really it is a lot about taking a deep breath and, like Kim said, occupying more space, like get bigger, expand yourself out.
And you just simply ask it to do that and it will.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And then the more you do that too, you become aware of like when you start to feel like that enclosed, or however you might want to say it, like you got pressure coming on, pressure on your skin, or that's when you're like, okay, wait, where am I at? Whose reality am I in? And the more you can do that and stop it and take a breath and expand your space, life gets easier. And then you use your awareness for you.
Yeah. And then I just want to like put that in context for parents with kids.
Yes.
And especially, you know, kids on the spectrum, right? This is potentially a bigger issue for them. Like, so let's say, you know, you're in Chuck E. Cheese and your kid's freaking out, or in the mall or whatever. Again, with them, what I've done, like, because I used to be a nanny, is sort of like get in their space, meaning like, you know, so that you can like, they can focus on you. And then I'll say like, okay, let's take a big breath and take a couple of big breaths. And then I'll say like, okay, what's going on? What are you aware of? And now let's make a big giant ball of energy all the way around us, up into the sky and down to the center of the earth and all the way to the edges of the planet. And can you guys perceive, just doing that now, how it's different? Why are you laughing?
I'm laughing because Rufus, her dog, is laughing. Is barking. And as soon as he did that and got bigger, he stopped.
Yeah. So that's a great, super easy tool for parents. It doesn't have to look weird. It just looks like you're having a conversation, like a close conversation with your kid. So
it's the willingness to actually, we call it like expanding your zone or your zone of awareness, but it really is being able to, sometimes when you are overloaded, it's almost like that zone or whatever collapses. So it's actually taking it and spreading it out and making it big again.
Yeah.
And that creates so much more space for that person and for yourself.
Yeah. So that's it for today on Spherical Awareness. Hopefully it's a little bit more clear, because to be honest, you know, sometimes we still get confused.
It's just a big old sphere. Just get out of the pot.
Yeah.
Just kidding. It really is a capacity. So once you recognize that, you can use it for you.
Yep. So if you guys want to find out more about the podcast, or what in the world we're up to, or better yet, where in the world we are, go to energeticsignatureformula.com, pop in your email address. You get a link to a freebie, which will cover some of the stuff that we talked about today, plus a bunch of other stuff. And that's it. We'll see you next time.
All right. Have a great week.
See you later. Thank you for listening to the show.
Our target is to make your awareness easy to use and to acknowledge the power of not fitting in.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to our channel on YouTube and share it with someone you know.
Why fit in when you were born to stand out?
Embrace your difference. Join the Misfit Squad.